This is another theory step where we would try and understand what are the different parts of the Spring framework itself. We are using Spring MVC, but there are other things about Spring other than Spring MVC. There are a lot of Spring modules present. So, what are they and how can you use them? That's basically what we would discuss in this step. In an earlier step, we made use of features of Spring called component scan and auto wiring. These are kind of the most basic features in Spring. These features were part of a functionality called dependency injection. Dependency injection is the core of the Spring framework. Where does the dependency injection come from? The dependency injection comes from the core container module. So the core container module which you see in this picture is responsible for the dependency injection feature and a few other basic features in Spring. For example, internationalization, message bundles, property files loading, all that kind of stuff would be part of this core container. The most important part of the core container is to take care of the bean life cycle. Earlier, we saw that we didn't want the to-do service and the login service to be created by us. So we didn't create them. Who created them for us? The Spring framework created it. The specific part of the Spring framework which handles this is present in the core container. That's the Spring beans. The Spring beans takes care of the life cycle of the bean. There are a lot of additional features which are present in Spring which are provided by the thing called application context. So this beans is kind of the representation of a bean factory. So this module is most important class which is there in here is the bean factory which takes care of the life cycle of the bean. Context jar adds more features onto the bean factory and provides more features like internationalization, messaging and things like that. This is where the application context comes into picture. The module that we are using right now is the web module. We are using the web part of this. So we are using Spring MVC. So we are using the web servlet part of it. There are a couple of new technologies. Portals is not really new. If you want to deploy a web application as part of a portal, then you create a portlet. So Spring MVC has a support for it. It's called Spring MVC Portlet. It's a separate thing. It's different from the Spring MVC that we are learning right now. But in terms of concepts, it's the same. Other than the web layer, Spring also has very good integration with the data layer or the external interface layer. So for the data layer, Spring has something called Spring JDBC, which makes it very easy to make queries. So if you write 100 lines of JDBC code typically in Spring JDBC, you'd probably be able to do that with 25 lines of code. Spring ORM provides integration with popular ORM frameworks like Hibernate, Toplink, etc. Spring JMS enables us to communicate with external systems over queues. So we can put a message on a queue or JMS message on the queue and get the response back on the queue as well. OXM is Object XML Mapping. Whenever I want to send an XML to an external system, I would want to convert the Java code to XML. And the OXM module is useful in that. It helps in converting Java code to XML and the XML back to Java. Transactions is another important part of the Spring framework. Actually, transactions is very important part of any application that we develop. And Spring has good support for it as well. Other than this, the most important part of Spring is Spring AOP. AOP is Aspect Oriented Programming. You can kind of think about AOP as a technology which enables intercepting any calls between any classes. Let's say the login service is being called from the login controller, but I would want to intercept the call and I would want to do something in between. That kind of things are enabled by AOP. Spring AOP has some basic functionality for AOP as well, and also it has good integration with AOP frameworks like AspectJ. And last but not the least is the test framework in Spring. So Spring has a test module which would enable us to unit test any of the things that we have discussed until now. The idea behind this step was to give you an overview of the Spring framework, the different modules which are present in the Spring framework. In this course, we are really talking about Spring MVC, but I thought it would be good to have a big picture of where we are working right now. Good luck. Until the next step.